discussing many of the questions that you have sent in to us over the last couple of days with regards to our reopening adjustment in our plan. I want to thank you for spending some time and setting some time to be able to hear some of our responses to your questions. What was going to be happening is that I'm going to turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Mr. Michael Tremblay. He will take us through a little bit of the agenda and what we'll be speaking about tonight, and he'll then bring it back to me. I'll give an overview, and then we'll go to our Assistant Superintendents who will be talking about many of those questions that you have put forward to us. Assistant Superintendent Tremblay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DiCarlo. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to our fourth town hall on our reopening and mitigation plan for the Mahopac Central School District for the 2020-21 school year. Joining us tonight, as Mr. DiCarlo said, we have our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Anthony DiCarlo, Dr. Greg Stoll, Assistant Superintendent for Pupil Personnel and Ed Services, myself, and Ms. Sandra Clohessy, the Assistant Superintendent for Business. Just a few logistics. I just want to make everybody aware, as is good etiquette in today's virtual meeting world, we are letting you know that this is being recorded and that your attendance here is consent to that. Again, the purpose of this, same objectives as before as the previous town halls, with an additional objective of providing an update on aspects related to our mostly remote opening on the September 9th to the anticipated start date of October 5th. And our agenda, so many of the submitted questions, or the majority of the submitted questions, fell into a few emergent overarching themes. Number one, overarching inquiries about remote opening. Mr. DiCarlo will address those. Staffing questions, Mr. DiCarlo will also address that. Ms. Clohessy will address questions related to school lunch and also to financial programs. Dr. Stoll will address three emergent themes dealing with health and safety, special education, and technology. And I'll round out our evening by addressing any questions related to instruction. Just a reminder, this information we're giving you is the best to our knowledge at this time and reflects our best thinking about the current situation at this time as well. With an ever-changing health crisis, we need to make changes often based on new information. Whether it's changing our strategies to reopening because of new mitigation strategies that we're being told to implement, that the virus is changing in terms of its spread, and also involving best practices in how we can deal with this, and also regulatory guidance from authorities. I'm receiving word that my mic is a little off, so I want to just make sure I take a second to adjust that. Mr. DiCarlo, is my audio a little bit better?
Yes, Mr. Tremblay, it's better, a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder of two key important COVID-19 response contacts. Our District Safety Officer, Dr. Greg Stoll, and then our COVID-19 Resource Officer, Mr. Troy Bilyeu, and he acts as the liaison between the Department of Health and coordinating questions about the COVID-19 health emergency response protocols. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Superintendent DiCarlo to address some of the overarching questions that we received and staffing questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tremblay. And again, welcome all of you who are out there on tonight's town hall webinar. As you're aware through my correspondence throughout the course of the summer, one of the things that I talked about is things will be evolving during the course of the school year. Suffice it to say, some things evolved before the school year happened, and a little bit of an explanation as I did in the letter that was sent home to you on Friday. As you're aware, and we go back to the guidance from the governor, the Department of Health, and the State Education Department, I wish that they had been all on the same page and came up with a universal plan for all schools doing and adapting the same type of a model, so that some of the issues and concerns that we're dealing with now may not have happened that way, but they did. And as you are aware, over the last number of weeks, and we followed this throughout the Lower Hudson region, there were some school districts who decided, for some reasons of their own, not to develop the hybrid model as we had originally planned to do. And some of the thinking behind that was that, we're going to sit and wait and pause and wait to see what happens with other districts and how they open up. Are they going to have a high amount of COVID cases? Are other things going to happen? So we'll sit back and we'll see how they fare. And then based on how they fare, we can adjust what we're looking to do. Well, what wound up happening is that became a domino effect. So as some of the districts north to us, and then recently some of the districts that surround us, by having them do that pause, it caused us to have some difficulties in our capability of opening up. And I want to be a little bit clear about that. As we have seen with the COVID pandemic, there are individuals and staff members, not just teachers, who may have some underlying conditions that would prohibit them from coming into school and teaching. But those specific requests have to go through a process. And that process just doesn't happen in a day. That process has to happen through our HR department, getting the paperwork, getting specific notes from individuals, doctors, and then our specific school physician looking at that and ascertaining what that accommodation can or can't be. And as those accommodations came in over the last week or week and a half, we need time to be able to sift through that. In addition, as I mentioned to you in the letter that I sent out to you, with the First Family Response Act, as other districts were going to remote, we had a number of teachers who, for their specific needs with childcare had put in. And it just caused us to say, we need to pause because we're not going to be able to open our buildings up with the amount of staff that we need to be with our students. And with that being said, that's what the pause was for. The reasoning for the October anticipated date is we wanted to make sure, parents, that we gave ourselves enough time to be able to logistically and realistically meet those needs, which means the following: going out and if teachers are taking a permanent leave, we have to find teachers for leave replacements. If teachers are taking some sporadic childcare leaves, we have to then make sure we have enough individuals to be able to be in those classes, to be with the students for issues, of course, of supervision. So we have begun to look at those areas. We are, as you know, I sent out in my letter, we have advertisements on OLAS. So we're looking for TAs and monitors so that we can not only fill the positions that we need to fill, but also have a number in waiting so that if for some reason we have other additional staff, we have those people to place in. Now, remember something: when we're looking at these accommodations and we're looking at currently, anywhere from 50 to 55 individuals that have requested it, doesn't mean they're going to get it. We also have to take in consideration on a daily basis that we have teachers who may be absent. So, we're working on adding more permanent subs to our building. We are starting to fill these leave replacements. And we thought a realistic date was that date anticipated of October 5th. The worst thing we could do is to go out there and give you a date that's not realistic and then have to come back to you again and say, oh, by the way, we have to extend it again. So that was why that date was the anticipated date that we decided to choose and we decided to pick. One of the questions that has come up, well, Mr. DiCarlo, what are you going to do that's going to change between now and October 5th? And that's a big question. I can tell you the district is working on a number of creative ways to be able to work with our staff so that they can come in and to be able to develop and sit with that hybrid model. We're in the process of looking at what that can be and what we can do with those creative ways. And that's something too that we need some time to get in place so that we can be able to offer as much opportunity for our staff, not just our teachers, to be able to come into work and then provide that hybrid opportunity to get our kids in and then to have that instruction from our teachers on a continual basis. Because as we know, that's very, very important as we go through the school year. Another question that came up was with regards to cohorting. And are we going to be changing our cohorts? We know we sent out to you blue and gold. No, we're not. We can't, because we made those determinations based on what information that we know and the placing of students. I know that's been a question that's out there. Can we change them? We're not looking to change them. We want to stay with the cohorts the way that they are. Sports. What about sports and what's happening with sports and where are we at? So Section 1 today released a memo that sports will be starting in Section 1 on September 29th. It will be for low risk sports at the start. That's cross country, that's field hockey, that's girls tennis, and that's boys and girls soccer. What you'll see it not in there is competitive cheer, football, and volleyball. As of now, that is considered a high risk sport by the state of New York, and they're making a determination on whether or not those can be played in the fall or they have to be moved to a later point in time. With that being said, we're going to follow what that looks like. If there will be those other high-risk sports offered, we're asking that the governor make a determination sooner than later so that we know that. I know in his latest correspondence, he talked about letting you know by December 31st. Well, that doesn't do us any good because we're going to have students and athletes starting to practice. They need to know whether or not there's going to be a season or not as they go through that. Also, question is, can you, Mr. DiCarlo, talk to me about next week and what that's going to look like on the 9th, 10th, and 11th? So the 9th and 10th and 11th now will be half-day remote days. Your principals from each building will dig deeper into that. But just as a reminder, the high school next week will be remote learning from 7:20 to 10:15. The middle school will be from 7:55 to 11. And I'll have this in my write-up on Friday. Lakeview will be 8:15 to 11, and Austin and Fulmer Road will be 9 to 11:45, so that your children can remote in, and they'll be receiving instruction remotely during those half-day hours. And then on the 14th, we go back to normal school hours. High school 7:20 to 2:02, middle school 7:55 to 2:37. Lakeview 8:15 to 3:25, and then Austin and Fulmer 9 to 3 o'clock. And Mr. Tremblay will go into more detail about what that remote will look like and what those expectations are as we go through that. One of the questions also was, Mr. DiCarlo, when are we going to go back to 5 days a week and we get everybody back in? That's going to be really determined by the CDC as well as the New York State Department of Health, and that will have a lot to do with social distancing. So hopefully as the pandemic subsides and we start to see things getting better, should they limit the amount of social distancing and recommendation, that will have an impact on whether we can get students in 5 days a week as we go through that process. One of the questions was, Mr. DiCarlo, talking about input from parents. We're going to be working with our thought exchange over the next couple of weeks and getting some questions out to you, working with our faculty to see where we're at, how things are going. And really, as we evolve our program, share ideas and your thoughts and I know our thoughts, how things are going, so that we can meet all the needs of our learners as we go through this school year. One of the questions that came up, and we will dig a little bit deeper, Mr. Tremblay, what were the numbers going in, Mr. DiCarlo, about parents wanting remote learning opposed to parents wanting in person? And a couple of weeks ago, and again, that's changed, and we'll show you some of those numbers, but the original numbers that we got were 83% of our parents wanted some type of in-person instruction, and 17 wanted full remote. As I said, Mr. Tremblay will dig deeper into that as we go through this presentation tonight. So that is a quick overview. I know the bigger questions were about, if we are opening, what's that going to look like? Any difference than now? I kind of explained the work that we're doing behind the scenes to work through some of these creative plans to get our teachers to be able to come in. And we do need some time to fill these spots so that we can have kids in front of them on our anticipated date of October 5th. So I'm now going to turn it over to Mrs. Cloesi, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the financial implications of what we're doing and where we're at. Ms. Cloesi?
Good evening, everyone. We received some questions regarding property taxes and the possibility of reducing taxes. what I'd like to talk to you about a little bit is to remind you of the budget process. During our budget process, we appropriated $3.4 million to lower the tax levy, to bring that tax levy down to 1.66. So we have, in essence, refunded some money through that revenue tax levy reduction. Now, also, one of the things that even though schools are closed, it doesn't mean that the business of schools has stopped. So as that business of schools continues, we are paying salaries and contractual items. We paid our salaries and contractual items through June 30th, and they continue to be paid as schools are open. In addition, salaries and benefits are approximately 80% of our school budget. So knowing that, the reduction of other expenses does not lead to the surplus that people would expect when schools are closed, because we're not closed. We are still operating. Also, once we do open, that hybrid approach is going to cost us more because of the additional need for PPE and also for the additional staff that we need in order to operate the schools, even though we are in a hybrid situation. I'd like to add to that in addition, and that brings me to my next bullet, the state has now reduced our revenues for state aid by approximately 20% or $6 million. While that it is almost certain without the federal aid bailout to come through, if that does not come through, there is also another potential for the STAR, and that's unclear whether STAR. Now, STAR will not be, you will not be affected as an individual taxpayer. It will not change your tax bill, but it may change the fact that the district gets that portion of STAR, and that's another 1.3 million. So we're very concerned about the fact that we have this state aid reduction, and we don't know if we'll have federal aid to replace that. Leading to the next question that was asked, and it had to do with the letter that we had spoken about regarding these state aid reductions. So I just want to let you know, part of that letter stated that the Department of Budget updated financial plans to include $8.2 billion in recurring local aid reductions, and that the state states that the earliest the Department of Budget expects to transmit a detailed aid to localities reduction plan is not until the spring of 2021. So again, without a federal bailout plan for New York State, we will not be given most of the revenue that we, not most of the revenue, 20% of the revenue that we expected to come, which will be anywhere from 6 million to 7.3 million. And we also believe this is a multi-year problem, so we're a little concerned. So state aid and property taxes are somewhat tied together, because without either of them, we could be in a deficit position. So hopefully I'll be able to give you more information that the federal government may come out. I would definitely say, please go out and advocate for the federal government to help New York State, especially for educational purposes. Last but not least is the school lunch. School lunch free and reduced applications are available on the district website. So anyone who is planning to apply should apply at this time. You're able to download that from the website and then get it to us. Also, just so you know, so you go to the district website, it's under departments and then food service. If you scroll to resources, you will see the 2021 letter and application for free and reduced meals. The question that was asked also was, how are we doing that? So each school is doing it a little differently. Some kids will be going through the line and eating in their classrooms. Some will go through their lines and be socially distanced in the cafeterias. So some will not leave their rooms and the lunches will be delivered. So that will depend on the school that you're in. Another announcement, and it's not 100% certain now, but the USDA has extended food service waivers until December 31st or until funds run out. So that's where we don't know exactly what that means. But should New York accept and approve that, all students will receive free lunch through December 31st, as long as the program stays in place. But after that, it would revert back to that free and reduced application process. So if you're planning to apply, please do it sooner rather than later. And then also, we will be having food service distribution at the high school starting September 14th. And it will be from 11 to 12:30, the same drive-by pickup that we did in the past. So those are the questions that I received for those topics, and I will pass that on, I believe, to Dr. Stowell.
Yes, thank you, Sandra. And I wanted to first start off by saying I know that all of us as parents and teachers and educators believe that having students in their classrooms with their teachers and coming to school with their peers is critically important. And this pandemic has not only affected students and their families, please know that it has also affected all of us as educators and teachers. The question has been, and not only for MAYAPAC, but how do all school districts in our region, in our state, how do we get everyone back into our schools as safe as possible, knowing that COVID is still a global pandemic and it is not over. That is what we have been tasked with. And I hope this evening we can help bring some clarity and I can bring some clarity for some of the questions that relate to what I've been charged with in this task. So first questions had to do with students with disabilities. And we read through them. I think all these questions were really thoughtful and we want to make sure that we answer those. First, students with disabilities and what was the process of assigning them to either a cohort or in-person learning. For students with disabilities that were originally assigned to either a cohort like their typical developing peers, or for a very small percentage of students with disabilities of high level of need, they may have been assigned to in-person services or 5 days a week. And this had to do with that small population because the level of their need required significant and substantial special education services, and that's consistent with New York State guidance. And when we refer to our highest level of need for students with disabilities who require in-person services, we're really referring to those students who receive special education services throughout the entire school day. And they're typically in a non-integrated setting or a special class setting. And again, this is consistent with guidance from the New York State Special Education Program. Other special education decisions about individual particular needs, I know came in some of these questions, and I really believe they're most appropriately handled on a case-by-case basis and are often under the purview of the Committee on Special Education. So any parent or guardian or even student has a question about their child or how their services will be provided either currently or when we transition to a hybrid model, I encourage you to contact the special education administrator for either the elementary schools, which is Mr. Fitton, or for the secondary schools, which is Dr. Sweeney. Another question that came in had to do with technology and had to do with connectivity. As many of you know, in the last few years, instructional technology has been central to our instructional model. And given the current state of education during a pandemic, it's now essential. And to that end, our district, and we appreciate the support of our community and our staff, we've really moved quickly to get devices in the hands of students and staff. We've worked quickly to increase our network bandwidth, as well as deploy new and exciting software products. However, like in your own home, there are limitations and at times interruptions in services that are sometimes unavoidable. In terms of network bandwidth, we increased our bandwidth and we tested it over the last 2 days with hundreds of staff members in schools streaming video. I'm happy to report that as projected, we had enough bandwidth to support all of those hundreds and hundreds of staff members streaming video at the same time, which would support a hybrid model with certain limitations to how students stream when they're on site. However, there are things that are out of our control. And one such situation happened very briefly during 2 days ago. And those things are such things as latency and delay. And sometimes they have to do with web-based sites such as Google or Zoom and other software sites. If you've ever been on a Zoom and someone pixelates or freezes, it's not necessarily something with your internet. Sometimes it's the actual website, Zoom. In addition, we always are subject, like you are in your own house, to any service interruptions due to internet service provider outages, faulty hardware such as servers or switches. But over the course of the years, the Mahopac Central School District has over a 99.9% uprate, meaning that we don't see huge outages in our network. Most importantly, our network manager, the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center, has put out a press release that they may not be able to handle the entire new amount of traffic in the region, such as us and other partner districts. Therefore, even though our personal bandwidth is fine, we may see some interruptions in services. And lastly, if you, as a parent or a guardian or a student, if you need technology support, please put on a tech request ticket, which is available on our reopening site. And many of you have, and we appreciate it, and we'll work really hard to really support you during these unique times. The other thing that were questions that came to us had to do about mitigation and masks. And I've said these in town halls, and I'll just briefly go over it. We have 2 levels of mitigation available to us that we personally can do. And one is physical distancing, and the other is face coverings or masks. And questions came in about masks. So first of all, masks are required for all staff and students in common spaces such as hallways, shared offices, and classrooms. Certainly, as we talked about, which is a very, very rare occurrence in medical documentation that is subject to our approval, could be somebody having a mask exemption. It's very rare. So if you don't have that and it's not approved by us, everybody should be wearing a mask. A little bit about masks according to the CDC. Masks are a simple barrier to help prevent respiratory droplets from traveling into the air and onto other people when the person wearing the mask coughs, sneezes, talks, or raises their voice. And this is called source control. There are some things about masks that we need to all know and be personally responsible for. So masks with exhalation valves or vents should not be worn because they will release some respiratory droplets. The other thing is that cloth masks should be at least 2 layers, fit securely around the nose and the chin. And lastly, just because someone takes a quick mask break doesn't necessarily mean that you're exposed. The Department of Health talks about any potential exposure is close proximity within 6 feet for a duration of more than 10 minutes. So please make sure that your student comes with a mask. If they malfunction, if they're the wrong type of mask, we'll give you a call. We have backup masks, temporary, that we'll have on site for any student or staff member who doesn't have a mask or it malfunctions. So we have plenty of that. That goes into the last questions that asked questions about, does the district have an adequate supply of PPE in order to open? And the answer to that, the short answer is yes. We have an adequate supply of PPE for certain populations of students and staff, as well as I said before, backup supplies of masks for anybody who forgets to bring or their mask malfunctions. We're fortunate as a district to have ordered PPE supplies very early in the preparation process. So therefore, we already have enough, and it's already being deployed, enough PPE in stock that it wouldn't have precluded us from starting the school year on time. So we appreciate the questions. I appreciate the time. And at this point, I'm gonna hand it over to Mr. Tremblay.
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. Just want to thank the community for submitting comments. Primarily, the comments submitted talked about what would the remote instructional classroom possibly look like, and what were some particulars of the remote classroom, and also some counts on the number of students who have chosen to go in the hybrid model and the number of students who have chosen to go remote only. And I'll be happy to share those with the community. And just want to echo Dr. Stoll's statement that getting kids back into the schools is our highest priority, and doing that safely is also the highest priority. And in terms of the instructional design, to get us to that point, we know that no matter what type of instructional framework we have, nothing is better than having our kids in with our teachers and learning in a collaborative and engaging classroom. Before I start into the questions, just want to remind everyone to continue to visit our reopening website for the plethora of resources that are there, and also take a look at our teaching and learning plan, our reopening plan on the website, because we will continue to update that based on feedback we receive and update the initial plan, which again reflected our best thinking at that time. We'll continue to update our approach to teaching and learning, just like we would continue to update our safety plan if new information was presented to us that could allow us to keep kids safer. If we receive that input from teachers, from parents, administrators, and regulatory agencies such as the New York State Education Department, if they have new mandates that we have to follow, we'll update it in accordance to that. Again, we mentioned that is a living document, so please do check with that plan every few days. Many of the submitted questions from the community ask what remote learning will look like during the time period from now until our October 5th anticipated transition to a hybrid learning model. And asking if remote learning will be similar to last spring. In the spring, when we broke for the distance learning, the remote learning in that model, we were faced with a pandemic of unknown proportions that none of us had any idea. I think Governor Cuomo used to say, we don't know if we can tame the beast in his daily presentations at that time. And we had no idea how the virus might impact households of our staff and of our students. So this plan in the spring reflected flexibility in order to ensure that we would not negatively impact students and or staff because of what they might be dealing with due to the pandemic, such as unemployment, household illness, and mandatory statewide closures. With very little notice, our teachers found themselves teaching from home in an environment that they more than likely never ever taught in before. And our students were learning in an environment that more than likely they never have learned in before. And many parents found themselves dealing with a number of stressful uncertainties. And in spite of that, our staff worked very hard to support our students to the best of their ability, and I'm very proud of their efforts under those circumstances. In building our current plan within ever-changing guidelines, we are seeking to provide instruction with more student-to-teacher interaction and more student-to-student interaction, and trying to keep school as normal as possible, with air quotes around normal. In general terms, we anticipate the remote instruction for students will consist of a mixture of daily live interactions, guided assignments to complete by students, check-ins with teachers, and independent work throughout the instructional day. It's the balance that we have to strike here, because on one hand, we don't want our students, many of the questions I received asked if we plan on having our youngest learners on the screen for 6 hours a day connected to a live classroom. And the bottom line is we're walking a fine balance that we're learning about together. We do not want students, K through 12, staring at a screen for 6 hours a day. Many of you who have probably sat in meetings all day know how that may impact you. But we also know that coming into this year, we want to have times where our students are interacting directly with their teacher. Now, this will look different for various grade levels and subjects. Currently, our elementary teachers are working together to identify what their anticipated schedules might look like. And once solidified, those frameworks will be communicated to students so households have an idea of when certain activities, such as live instruction, will occur during the day. The majority of our secondary students will follow their daily schedule, meaning if they had science first period and social studies second period, they would join each one of those classes remotely and virtually at the time that their schedule indicates. And while each classroom may look different, we anticipate that a classroom lesson could look similar to this. The start of the class could begin with teachers connecting to the live Google Meet established by their teachers in the Google Classroom. The teacher could take attendance, check in with students, see how everybody's doing, and explain the learning plan for the day. The teacher could deliver whole group instruction on any new information that might be provided in terms of content or any essential content information, doing this to students via Google Meet. The teacher could then break the students off for a mixture of independent and collaborative work with check-ins with the teacher checking in on those students as they're working, and end with a whole class debriefing before the transition to the next lesson or class. And again, in very general terms, a portion of every instructional period or session should include live instructional activities facilitated by the teacher. Some teachers have also been exploring various ways to pre-record some lesson activities to provide additional access to students for classroom resources if they need to go back to them. We had some questions asking about the technology that we have. We looked to post resources to our Google instructional resources to our Google Classroom using Google Meets for live instructional purposes, and various other technology tools can be utilized to facilitate the type of learning environment just briefly described. And we are continuing to provide professional learning to our teachers on those tools and ways to support remote, hybrid, and fully in-person learning. And I just want to really recognize, again, some efforts of our teachers. We've had 2 fantastic days led by our teachers teaching their colleagues on how to make this plan effective with our students, and how to change our paradigm of how we teach in this model, because teachers have really had to take on the heavy lift of thinking how to operate within this model. While there are many changes to the start of the school year, as you can already see, we are trying to keep as many aspects normal for our students as possible. And again, we'll use normal in air quotes, such as the majority of our teachers will be teaching from an instructional classroom space, connecting to Google Meets with students, provided through web-enabled cameras such as those on Chromebooks. We're trying to keep the same, that we still expect students to act in a manner that lives out our district core values, such as resiliency, compassion, critical thinking, and to conduct themselves just as they would in person in a manner that does not impede or disrupt the teaching and learning environment. The student code of conduct still applies in our remote classroom. Teachers' lessons are not allowed to be recorded by students. We're trying to create grading as normal as possible. We anticipate using our standards-based report card at the elementary levels and our traditional department-based grading systems in the middle and high school to express student progress towards academic benchmarks. Also, trying to keep the same during remote instruction, certain classrooms will still be supported by teaching assistants and special education teacher aides. Building start and end times were trying to be kept the same. Attendance will be taken twice a day for elementary schools, and at each period for the middle and our high school students. If a student has lunch or study hall scheduled at a particular time, they would not have to connect to their teacher's Google Classroom or Google Meet. Attendance will not be taken for study halls. Again, in the vein of trying to keep things as normal as possible, what will this school year look like? We will continue to facilitate college entrance exams, such as the SAT, which will occur on September 26th, and also the October 3rd test date. We look to conduct the PSAT on October 7th, and a to-be-determined test date for the ACT. If you have questions about this or any guidance-related or counseling-related program, please be sure you touch base with your child's guidance counselor for specifics, or address questions to our K-12 Director of Guidance, Dr. Erin Kleinman. Trying to keep things as normal as a school year as possible, again, keeping in that theme. Our BOCES programs will support students choosing to attend in person or remotely, and the district will be providing transportation. Seniors who have a valid driver's license and plan to use their vehicle to drive to BOCES may do so. Additionally, if you are a junior, or if you are the parent of a junior parent, and they have a license, BOCES is working on a plan to allow the student to drive to their campus. And in the next few days, you should receive a more detailed update from Dr. Kleinman, our K-12 Director of Guidance and Counseling. In some of the questions, there were concerns about students not being able to interact with other students while learning remotely. As again, it goes right to our point of trying to get students back as quickly and safely as possible into the classroom. However, we will utilize tools such as Google Meet. That provides the capability for students to interact with each other when the teacher deems appropriate. And we've spent time over our past superintendent's conference days exploring how to create appropriate social connections in remote learning environments. And now, some things have changed, as you know. To a nod on that, some of the questions asked about extracurricular activities. While the majority of extracurricular activities are canceled at this time, there will be certain clubs that can be facilitated virtually. Club advisors will be communicating out about those specifics as we get the year started. And at this time, unfortunately, we will not have musical productions or plays occurring. Some submitted questions asked for clarity on what students can do while attending class and following their daily schedule while remotely. The best answer is to check with your teacher on specific expectations for classes. Additional things, rather than physically changing classes, such as elementary students would be as they walk to the art room for a class, or the high school student moving from math to chorus, students will most likely need to click out of one Google Classroom and into the other. This will not require students to log out of their Chromebook, so one login per day should be sufficient. There were some questions about, will my child have to log in and out of my Chromebook? And again, class and start end times of the high school and middle school will follow the regular period bell schedule. Finally, we had a question regarding how many students in each grade level will be at each building learning in the hybrid model and learning in the remote-only model. I'm going to share a breakdown of that right now. But please do note that these numbers were current as of September 2nd. And the numbers may skew just slightly the remote-only student counts, because when we have new enrollees, our student information system automatically puts them into the remote-only cohorts, just because the way the configuration is set up to allow for cohort scheduling. It will automatically put them into the remote-only section until they have been assigned a schedule. So that there may be a few numbers slightly higher in the remote section. We'll start first with Fulmer Road, and I'll go through each grade level here. At Fulmer Road in kindergarten, we have 68 students who have opted into the hybrid learning model and 7 students who have opted into remote only. First grade at Fulmer Road, 63 students in the hybrid model and 9 students in the remote only model. Fulmer Road second grade, 60 students have chosen the hybrid model and 15 the remote only model. At Fulmer Road in third grade, 47 students at the hybrid model and 16 students for the remote only. Fourth grade at Fulmer Road, 89 students have chosen the hybrid model and 15 for the remote only model. And at fifth grade in Fulmer Road, 69 students in the hybrid model and 14 for the remote only. We'll move now to our Austin Road Elementary School. In kindergarten, 68 students have chosen the hybrid model and 14 remote only students. In first grade at Austin Road, 72 hybrid students, 18 remote only students. Austin Road second grade, 78 students have chosen to learn through the hybrid model and 16 have chosen to learn through the remote only. At Austin Road third grade, 87 students in the hybrid model and 22 students have chosen to learn remote only. In fourth grade at Austin Road, 71 students for the hybrid model and 17 students for remote only model. And at fifth grade at Austin Road, 81 students have chosen the hybrid model and 15 students have chosen the remote only. We move now to Lakeview Elementary School. At kindergarten, 54 students have chosen to learn in the hybrid model and 13 students in the remote only. At Lakeview first grade, 62 students, the hybrid model, 18 students, the remote only. Lakeview second grade, 71 students in the hybrid model, 12 students in the remote only. At Lakeview third grade, 69 students in the hybrid model, 18 in the remote only model. At fourth grade, we have 73 students choosing to learn in the hybrid model and then 12 students in the remote only model. And at Lakeview fifth grade, 88 students in the hybrid model, 15 students in the remote model. Switching now to Mayapack Middle School, in sixth grade, 258 students have chosen to learn in the hybrid model and 28 students in the remote only model. At seventh grade, 246 students in the hybrid model, 55 students in the remote only model. And in the middle school at eighth grade, 231 students in the hybrid model and 36 students in the remote model. Moving on to Mayapack High School. Ninth grade has 287 students choosing to learn in the hybrid model and 37 remote only students. 10th grade, 269 students have chosen to learn in the hybrid model and 42 students in the remote only model. In 11th grade, 272 students have chosen to learn in the hybrid model and 58 in the remote only model. And finally, for our seniors, 310 have chosen to learn in the hybrid and 51 in the remote only. And again, that information is current in our system as of September 2nd. I want to say thank you to the community for submitting questions and for joining us this evening to hear the answers to those. Just a few reminders. Please, again, do visit our district reopening website. We are anticipated to start in our hybrid learning model on the 5th of October. Again, we cannot accommodate any changes of blue to gold cohort changes. However, at any time, you can choose to learn remotely, and then you will be given an option to go back in once a quarter at the secondary, go back into the hybrid model should we need to do so, once at the change of the quarter in the secondary and every trimester at the elementary. Just a reminder to reiterate what Mr. DiCarlo said in terms of superintendent's conference, upcoming schedule. On September 8th, there is no classes. That is the superintendent's conference day. where we'll engage in professional learning options for our teachers in the morning, and then in the afternoon there'll be building-based activities to help get ready for the upcoming school year. On September 9th, it is a half day for the majority of students in remote learning. And when we say the majority of students, Dr. Stoll mentioned that on these days, we would still be having, on the 9th and the 10th, we still would be having students with disabilities that have been identified and communicated with. We would be having them come in on those half days. Same thing on 9/10. On 9/11, all students will be learning remotely, even students who have been asked to come in every day. And then on the 14th, that will be our first full day of remote learning for the majority of all students, unless you've been your child has been contacted to come in every day, as mentioned by Dr. Stoll. I'll now turn it over to Mr. DiCarlo, our Superintendent of Schools, for any closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trombley, and thank you, Dr. Stoll and Ms. Cloesi, for your time and your efforts in getting the information out to the Mahopac community. So in closing, I just want to reiterate and stress a number of things. As I mentioned in the beginning of this, and you kind of heard from the assistant superintendents of where we're at, but most importantly, where we hope to go. So one of the questions that came up is, Mr. DiCarlo, how is this going to change if the schools around us don't adopt to a similar model to what we're doing? And I think what the districts are doing is exactly what we're doing. They're out there, they're trying to recruit, they're trying to get individuals, and then hopefully as they go to the hybrid model and those kids start to get back to school, we'll be able to, reap those benefits, and we will be able to do the same thing. And I really am confident in being very creative, not only as a district, but with our unions, be able to get our kids to get back on that anticipated date. I'm being very, very cautiously optimistic that we can all work together to get the kids back in. And as you can see by the survey and Mr. Trombley really digging deep, the kids want to get back in, and I know you as the parents want to get them back in. And in my heart of hearts, I think the teachers do too. It's just working together to make sure that we can get that to happen. I also want to make sure that we understand something, and it's very important. The spikes that have happened across the country have happened during spring breaks, during Memorial Day weekend, and now we have Labor Day weekend coming up. And the weather's going to be beautiful, and parents, I want you and your families to have a great and a safe time, but please wear your masks. If you're going to parties and you're going to outings, please do that, because here's my fear. We're planning, and I want to be optimistic, we're going to get kids back. I don't want to then have it taken away from us, because Region 4, which we're in, all of a sudden now gets an outbreak over the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then we have no choice but to remain fully remote. I don't want to see that happen. And I think it's very, very important that we keep that in the back of our minds, because, at the end of the day, I know we're all getting weary and sometimes we let our guard down, and we can have those great times with our families and friends, but just make sure that we do it in a manner that we're safe and that we can get our kids back in, because we don't want to see a spike up. So in closing, we hope we answered the majority of your questions. We're going to continue to do these type of things over the course of the year. If you have any subsequent questions, please feel free to email them to my secretary. That's Larocca, LAROCCAM, as in Mary, at mahopac.org. Again, I thank you all for attending tonight. Be safe. Enjoy the upcoming weekend and the weather that we're supposed to get. And we'll be in contact with you once again next week. Thank you for your support, your resilience, and understanding. God bless you all, and have a great Labor Day weekend. Thank you.